So I'm sitting here in my room. I've got my microphone set up. I've got my computer in front of me. I've got a notepad open. It's got my notes for my podcast. It's time to rewind. Looks like they're open to the 30th scene of Memento that starts in black and white at 62 minutes and 38 seconds, with Leonard being understanding for why the police didn't believe him, and ends at 64 minutes and 53 seconds, with Leonard scratching under a bandage on his arm. Wait, hang on. Who is this?
Bubba! It's Lisa Leaheey from Rabbit Hole Podcasts. We've got a book club podcast. We call it Pictures and Conversations. You've heard of it. Come on.
Oh, of course, but I prefer to be called Bubbawheat. And who are you?
Oh, sorry. I was just looking for food that I had around the house. I was, sorry. Wait, where is it? Where did I put those Oreos? It'll come back to me. When I get hungry, I'll hunt them down. No, it's Mark Hofmeyer. Thanks for having me back for another week.
Sure, it's glad to have you back. And, I think this really gives us an interesting perspective on the whole Sammy Jenkins story. And I feel like this almost gives us the most we get of past Leonard, like Leonard in his previous life. Because
hair slick back, tie, looking good.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit of a jerk too.
He's so smarmy in this. It just, you want to smack him.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to be by the books, but jumping ahead, he definitely could have said what he says a different way and still been like within compliance, like not giving away anything for the insurance claim.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought she just needed an answer. Oh, gosh.
God, I hate that moment when he leans forward. He's like, we probably shouldn't be talking like this while the case is still open for appeal. I'm like, I just want to punch him. I'm like, you are just this miserable, smarmy insurance guy, and I just don't like you.
This is kind of how Drag Me to Hell happened. It's a good thing he didn't get didn't get cursed.
That's a good point.
And have to fight a goat.
Yeah, and I was just listening to the commentary for this scene too, and you brought up the hiding food, and Mrs. Jenkins talks about Leonard talks about how Mrs. Jenkins would hide food or have Sammy hide food, and then whenever he's hungry, to see if that would trigger him remembering where he hid his food. And they said that was a scene in the script, and they considered filming it, but then they decided that it wasn't necessary. And also during doing research for it, that like a lot of times you'll get to a point where, you feel hungry for a little while, but then after that you stop feeling hungry, and then you're just kind of weak and shaky, and you don't know why.
Oh, yeah, and I'm glad that's not on film.
Jeez Louise.
Wow.
Especially with Steven in there.
Yeah.
That's not that kind of movie. That's kind of cold. Like, this movie ushers forth emotions, but I don't think that would have stuck out like a sore thumb, this movie. And we talked about in the last episode how calibrated Guy Pearce is with this, about giving away too much. Because they already have the one scene with him and her, Sammy and his wife. But I don't know, that would have been a little too emotional and sad for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think even just the description of it does make you start to think a little bit less of Mrs. Jenkins, because I think before you were definitely on board with her and you're very sympathetic towards her, and you're still sympathetic, but you definitely feel like that kind of crosses a line.
Absolutely. I think that if that was a scene that we had actually been given, all sympathy would have been out the window for her. And that there would have been no redeeming value to her. Like, hearing about it, and she's saying, like, I've done this terrible thing, like, that's a confession, that's remorse, that's guilt. I think if we had seen it, it would have crossed a line we wouldn't have been able to come back from.
You didn't need to have her crying and then grabbing the food for him. Just
Yes.
sort of a failed experiment that she did in desperation of like not being able to sleep or kind of
Right.
slowly losing her mind. Like
Right.
that's the only way to keep her still as someone you want to have, feel for, I guess.
Mhm.
So when she's in this office, you're like, yeah, this lady's bad.
Mhm.
I'm also trying to wonder, like, how you would visually portray that in a short period of time, too. Just, like, showing Sammy kind of looking through the cupboards and just kind of, like, holding his stomach.
Oh,
Just,
yeah. Oh,
Just rubbing
God.
his belly. That's it. The whole frame is just him rubbing his stomach.
Just looking at an empty fridge. It's
Oh,
like, where's
gosh.
all the food?
He should say that too. Where's all the food? Just be as obvious as possible. Oh gosh. Yeah, you know what? I think that's a good one right there. Just have like a 3-minute clip of him rubbing his stomach and looking around the kitchen.
Oh, I don't like this topic. This is making me sad.
But I do what she's saying though, is she wants to move on. So she just wants to know that, like, she could just know that he's not there anymore so she can move on. I mean, I feel like that's a pretty rational, thing to say. Like, I just want to know he's not in there so that we can move on with new Sammy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
it also really encapsulates just the misunderstanding of mental illness in general.
Yeah.
Because, the way that Leonard describes it and the way that he sees it is that he sees it as a mental illness and not like a brain injury that's causing it. It's a mental illness condition. And Mrs. Jenkins sees that too, but she has this misconception of what mental illness is. Like, she even says, basically her understanding is if it's a mental illness that I can just like snap my fingers or I can say the right words, like I can break him out of this hypnosis, and like we just have to figure out how to fix him without this understanding that no, it's a mental illness. Just because it's not physical, just because it's not from a physical brain injury doesn't make it any less real.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild how many, you look at like when people came back with PTSD from the wars, let's put some dirt on it, or they're just depressed, or
Yeah.
They're shell shocked.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, they'll get over it, or anything with women, you're being hysterical. Like, no, there are actual depression. There's postpartum depression. There's all these different types of things that stem up. But us through history, humanity, people are just like, you'll be all right. Like,
Yeah.
just it's not a mental illness. Like, it's fine. Like, they'll snap out of it. Like, stop being a wimp. So it's
just man up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, and that, I laugh at that, but that's true. Like, I think. Don't be all weird. But no, I suffer from clinical depression. Like, I think maybe there's more empathy starting in our country, but yeah, this is 2000 and I can totally see somebody just kind of not fully understanding that because, insurance companies probably don't want to understand that. Other people don't want to understand that. So it all kind of leads to a perfect storm for some tragedy.
Oh, definitely. You think about like an insurance company, they need to be able to crunch hard numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Like an actuary can't handle, vague numbers. It's not going to be how this goes. You have to make sure this is something that can be calculated out and they can put a percentage. Nobody in the insurance business wants, a possibility or, we think he should be able to make new memories. Like, that's not what's going to come up. So they have to make it as clean cut as possible.
Yeah, and that's, I don't think I shared this story on this podcast. I think I shared it in a group chat. But I was reading this story basically that paints the insurance companies and the healthcare as kind of villains. But it was this story I read about this family. It was a man and wife, and they had a young child, and they got into a car accident, and the child had to be hospitalized he was in the hospital, like ICU, for 24 hours, and then he unfortunately passed away. And the parents both had injuries, but they didn't have life-threatening injuries. And because of the situation, they were trying to deal with the insurance companies while being injured. and the hospital wouldn't treat them any further because they didn't accept the auto insurance, and their health insurance wouldn't pay until the auto insurance was exhausted. And so they were trying to, deal with calling the insurance companies and the hospital to try and figure out payments while grieving for their child. And then eventually the at-fault driver's insurance paid them a settlement that was, several $100,000, which was enough to cover the child's medical expenses. But then the insurance company sued them for that settlement, which they were legally allowed to do. And just reading this, it's like you just get infuriated at this system that it allows this situation to happen in the first place.
And you know what I think it is I remember one night, this is a random story, but I was driving home from work. This is 2015. I did a 14-hour day on, this is all immaterial, but I was working on Captain America Civil War. I always remember this. And I was driving home, and I was going straight down a road through a green light, and a car pulled right in front of me. I had no time to brake. I got into a huge accident. My truck was totaled. Oh. And it turns out the person with the insurance, they could only cover like $10,000 or $15,000. So my insurance company called me and they're like, oh yeah, we can only give you like a check for like $10,000, $15,000 because that's what their insurance does. But we both had the same insurance company. And I was like, no, like you're paying for this. And I had to argue with them. They're like, okay, we'll pay for everything. But I think I think sometimes they just have to try to be like, oh, hey, we can give you this. And then I guess sometimes people just say yes to that. And I'm not trying to like do an indictment of all the insurance company, but that's what happened to me.
Oh, they suck.
Yeah.
I'll say it. They suck.
It was crazy though, right? They were like, oh, well, their insurance can only cover this much. So this is what we're going to give you. And I'm like, that's a fourth of my truck. So they ended up taking care of it. But if I'd have said yes, I would have had nothing. Like, I would have had something, but I couldn't have gone and bought a new truck with that. So it was, oh man, just the way that they can kind of, I think they do plan on paying, but you got to fight it. And then they kind of want, like, it's in such a gnarly system that, yeah. And then you got Guy Pearson here that's selling it. He doesn't even know what's going on. He just gave her an answer that would make her happy, and it was the wrong answer. He just wanted to give her an answer.
Like, he just wanted her out of his office.
Yeah, he didn't even try to put him. Like, this is one of those situations where he had no empathy. Like, he didn't want to put himself in her place.
Definitely.
Ugh. Yeah, and I think that's, that lack of empathy, I think that does tie past Leonard to present Leonard.
Oh.
Because we do see that connection, because he doesn't really have empathy for any of the people around him because he can't remember them for more than 10 minutes. So how can you build any empathy towards people that you hadn't met before, that you didn't know before the incident?
That's a great point, because if you were just a genuinely empathetic person, you could at least think the best of him, but he doesn't seem to be that person. So yeah, he's not going to do that in 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think this scene also does, in a way, I think that it does connect to a certain extent Mrs. Jenkins' character with Leonard, because Mrs. Jenkins, she is looking for closure. Like, right. She wants to have something that can remove this doubt that the old Sammy can come back. And that's a closure that she's never going to get, because she's always going to have that little seed of doubt. And in the same way, Leonard is also seeking closure by finding this John G. Mm-hmm. And in the same way, he's never going to truly get that closure, because he's never going to remember it, or he's not going to write it down clearly enough, or he's going to lose the Polaroid, and then he'll be right back to square one.
Because he wants to lose that, though, right? Like, he doesn't want that closure. Doesn't he want to keep existing?
Well, that's just it, right? Because he uses that and manipulates himself with it, because he has the possibility of, like, I'm going to know. He's got this space that he tells Natalie, like, maybe this space is for when I finally do it, and he's like, no, I'll totally know when it happens. I'll know. It'll stick. And it's like, it's not going to stick, and we find out later that it definitely didn't stick. And hasn't stuck however many times he's done this. So this whole context of his certainty lines right up with Mrs. Jenkins' certainty that when Leonard tells her that Sammy should be physically capable of making new memories, she figures, okay, so there's got to be something I can do that'll knock him out of this. And, we end up with this scene that, she gives him his final test. There comes a point where that hope is lost, or she figures, you know what, this is severe enough that this will knock him out of it. And, we know where that goes.
Jeez Louise. She's so good too. I just want to give her props.
You look at these scenes and you just watch her eyes. She's so expressive. It's incredible.
I want to be best friends with her Licorice Pizza character too. She's a maniac in that movie.
I also love her in Werewolf by Night.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love that. My favorite scene in Werewolf by Night is when Gael Garcia Bernal, they're in that, I don't know, the tomb, and he does that little spin sit. Like, there's so much character to that. You know what I'm talking about? Like, when he goes to sit, but then he spins first and then sits. Like, that's why you hired.
That's slick right there.
I was like, that's why you hire Gael Garcia Bernal, is to add little funky touches like that. Yeah, that one's so good. I need to watch that again. Like 50 minutes? Shoot.
Yeah, it's been a little. I think I haven't seen it since like November.
And definitely. This scene in particular, I love the lighting, just the lamp lights. So just the way they kind of flank the heads and like the difference from the background and the foreground to each person in the office. Like, I love how they sort of thought through the black and white footage and how to light that with, like, I don't know, I kind of dig it up, like, the wooded panel, they're a little bit closer to it so the light fills it more. Then you turn to the back of Harriet Sansom and it's more of a white wall with a light in the background because you don't need as much of like a pounding light in that scene. So I just, I teach camera and lighting, so I really like the way this shot is set up and the way it's framed with the way the lights are. It's just a good looking shot. I dig it. I like the rule of thirds too. It's nice going on from a technical standpoint. I like the black and white stuff in this a lot. The shadows, the noir.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yes.
It does definitely, like, I love that vibe. Like, I wanted Bogart to just walk through a scene. It was dark, say. Sorry.
Yeah, one other thing that's about this scene and in this moment, going back to Mrs. Jenkins's reaction, she does walk away and she thanks him. She has a smile on her face even though she's wiping away tears. And he talks about how he thinks that he was helping her. And, at first, especially seeing the film again, you're like, no, he didn't help her at all. And in fact, he did the opposite of helping her. But, from her reaction, you do get the idea, like, you can see why he thought that he was helping her and that, she walked away in a better position than she walked in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she just wanted an answer, right? Like, she just wanted something from this guy. Do you even think he knew what was going on, or she just wanted to feel better?
Well, I think that he knew to a certain extent because he knows that because he did have like several home visits, and you can actually, like, whenever Sammy's going through the electroshock testing, you can see that Leonard is there too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can just barely make out his head on the other side of the window through the door.
Oh.
So he has, like, Leonard as a character has been, a presence in this situation. Like, he's been physically there through quite a lot of this as it's unfolding and, with his investigation. So I think he's very familiar with what they're going through.
Oh. And I also love how this scene, there's moments where, like when Harriet has the dialogue or Mrs. Jenkins has the dialogue, and for 6 seconds, it's just on Guy Pearce's face absorbing what she's saying. It's like, there's a lot of, this movie's very patient too. I mean, it's a longer film, but I think sometimes people didn't enjoy it because of the long lingering shot. It's not really in a hurry. Like you said in the last chapter, halfway through, I think we're finally moving forward. So I just like in this scene that they've really let the camera linger on him, on the characters. It's an interesting choice, and I think it may alienate some viewers, but I dig it. I like that it's not in a hurry, and it just sort of allows the characters to have room to breathe. And I dig this conversation a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like that, because the director wants you to look. he wants you to study, like pay attention to his facial expressions, pay attention to her eyes, and what's happening in this moment, what are the emotions they're going through in this conversation. I agree with you. I think it's so masterful.
Yeah, and you can tell that Leonard is just, for most of it, he's just very uncomfortable, and I think we said before that he just wants this interaction to end.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and he even says it too, right? He's like, I just wanted to say something to make her feel better. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, this one, I love what you said though, like the lack of empathy, the kind of, he just seems kind of like he doesn't want to have this interaction. So that makes a lot more sense when we make the decisions later on. So we need stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it at the beginning of this episode, but the fact that he says, I think he should be physically capable of making new memories it's very leading into one direction versus anything else, where he could have also instead said something like, I think that mentally he is incapable of making new memories, which that's basically from his perspective says the same thing, but from her perspective would say the complete opposite thing and would probably lead her to a different outcome.
Oh. I wish I had something more articulate to say after
that.
I
know! I was just thinking, I'm like, wow, there was a statement. Not that I had anything to add, so.
And then we cut back to him on the phone, and we just get him scratching at this bandage, this real heavy foreshadowing, which we get it a little bit at the beginning too, with him kind of scratching a little bit at the bandage before we cut to the whole scene, the flashback scene. Just them getting into this foreshadowing, because you can tell, I think it's pretty clear that this is a bandage tattoo. I think especially for anybody that has gotten tattoos before, it definitely looks like a tattoo bandage and not like from some sort of injury.
Oh yeah, those are what mine looked over. You just put them over the thing to like keep them moist, or I guess that's the right word. I know a lot of people hate that word, but I couldn't think of a better word. But yeah, that's what you do. I have a couple, so you just plop them on there and then you leave them on for a while. Yeah, but that doesn't look like a super scar or injury. Yeah, it's definitely a tattoo. Right. I should get more now. I'm gonna go get more because of this episode. Tattoos. Yeah.
No regrets.
No regret. No regrets.
Yeah, you're talking about these like classy tattoos in the last episode and things about this. And my first thoughts were no regrets and the dude and sweet tattoos from Dude, Where's My Car?
Sweet.
So that'll give you an idea of where my brain went when you talk about famous movie tattoos.
Listen, I'll do that. I'm a big fan of. I like Sean William Scott a lot. I'll get a dude if you get a sweet.
I will absolutely do that.
Dude, sweet.
Oh, I love that movie, and I really shouldn't. Like Zoltan. My taste. My brother wanted me to name my cat Zoltan.
Well, that movie goes all in. Dude, Where's
My Car? Funny.
It's so dedicated to being Dude, Where's My Car that it's kind of admirable until how far it leans into that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I was looking for it because there was somebody that was planning to do a Dude, Where's My Minutes, doing it 2 minutes at a time. But then I think he, I think he found a girlfriend, and life happened. Aww. And he's kind of, it seems, I get the impression that he's kind of moved away from podcasting. So I doubt that that's going to happen at all. Or maybe he might come back around to it. But I was kind of looking forward to that, and now I'm disappointed that it seems like it's not going to happen.
Oh, that would have been a great show.
It's your time, Bubbawheat.
Oh, I like that movie, but I've got, that's probably number,
Fight Club coming up.
Yeah. And I still have tons of other time loops to cover. I have a full, I'm looking at a big season on Star Trek episodes, which that's going to be a nice big season because there's a lot of those episodes.
Do you want to hear something cool? Real quick story. The first ever big thing I got from my writing was Tom Cruise retweeted my Edge of Tomorrow review in 2014,
Ooh.
I think. And I was just sitting on the couch and my phone started blowing up. And I was like, oh my gosh. So that was my first ever sort of big thing. And it was from a time loop movie of my review of it. I call it the Blockbuster Summer. So no wonder he retweeted it. But they must have.
That's funny too, because the day that we're recording this, I was on I guessed it on Edge of Tomorrow Minute.
Ooh.
And I was on episode 100 for minute 100, and that's just released today as we're recording this.
Oh, wow. Maybe we're in a time loop and we're on to each other here. And I also had to watch that movie. I've had to watch that movie 3 times. I had to figure out how far he runs in it. Then I had to figure out how tall he was in it. And so I compared him next to door frames and other actors. And yeah, so I had to figure out how tall he is in that movie. And he's just 5'7" in that film.
That's amazing.
I compared him to the helicopter, a door frame. And yeah, I did a lot of work figuring out that was a tough one to figure out how tall he was. But I had to do while I was running too. I adore that movie. But yeah, that's like my first big one. It was from a time loop movie. My first big like review thing. So it was 9 years ago. Jeez Louise.
Nice. Yeah. But I think that's really all I have for this scene. Do either of you have anything else?
I think we covered this scene and plenty of other scenes while we were going through.
Of course.
I need some tattoos. That's my final thought.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, I've got a few, but we've gone on enough tangents this episode. Maybe I'll save that for another one. Which I am surprised that I haven't talked about my tattoos at all this season yet.
Oh, there's always next week.
Yeah. All right. Well, once again, thank you, Mark, for joining us. And why don't you, here's another opportunity to plug anything else that you want to plug.
Just Movies, Films, and Flix podcast. Movies, Films, and FLIX. Also check out Con Air, the podcast, and Deep Blue Sea, the podcast. Lisa has been a guest on them multiple times. All 3 of them, actually. No, you're going to be on Con Air.
I think so. We're working out that schedule right now.
But you've been on DBS multiple times and MFF multiple times. And we have Midsommar and some other movie coming up that we're going to talk about.
Yes. All the good screwed up ones.
That's right. So yeah, just check those out.
All right. And as always, thank you, Lisa, for joining me as my co-host this season.
This has been super fun so far and can't wait to keep going.
All right, and as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on Twitter where I'm at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on all of the podcatchers out there, as well as we have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group. And you can join that and discuss episodes as they come out, as well as have discussions about anything else time loop related. It's all welcome. And until next time, have I already told you about Memento?
Oh, only every time I see you.
I believe that Sammy should be physically capable of making new memories.
Oh, yes. And
Ooh.
that soundtrack kills, too. I remember I bought the cassette tape.
So good.
I had the cassette. Mm-hmm. And I would listen to the Crow soundtrack on cassette. Yeah, I'm not
really
old.
Driving home that age, aren't you, Mark?
I'm happy. I'm really happy where I'm at.
I am
it's
too.
cool.
I'm good, too. It's funny. You just really kept saying it, though.
I was a little maniac buying like Rage Against the Machine cassettes, Nirvana cassettes. Memento wasn't on the soundtrack. I don't think I had the Memento cassette soundtrack.
Yeah, I have that one on CD. I do. I have it. It's in my desk drawer at school.
Wait, what?
I have the Memento soundtrack score in my desk at school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you play it?
Occasionally. I hear the swell of music and stuff, and it's I can recognize it anywhere.
Oh, I love it.
It's so good.
Yeah, and there's such a great, difference between the music for the black and white scenes versus the music for the color scenes. That you really get a very different feel to each of them.